What would you do if every screen on your billion-dollar warship suddenly went dark while sailing through one of the narrowest and most dangerous waterways on Earth? Imagine you are a sailor standing on the bridge of a destroyer. Your GPS is lying to you. Your radio is giving you false coordinates. The channel ahead is barely 20 miles wide, and you cannot trust a single instrument you depend on to stay alive. Now imagine this is not a nightmare. This is real. This happened. And the people responsible were sitting on a tiny island watching American ships go blind one by one. If stories like this keep you glued to your screen, do me a favor. Hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second, but it tells me you want more content exactly like this. Subscribe if you have not already, and share this video with someone who loves military history. You will not regret it. For 11 straight days, American warships moving through the Strait of Hormuz experienced something terrifying. Their electronics failed, not randomly, not by accident. The failures were coordinated. GPS signals scrambled. Navigation computers displayed false readings. Communication systems picked up phantom channels that did not exist. Ships that cost taxpayers billions of dollars were essentially flying blind through one of the most congested shipping lanes on the planet. Every single vessel that entered the strait lost its ability to see clearly, and every single one exited the strait shaking their heads, wondering what had just happened. The Strait of Hormuz is not a place where you want to be confused. It is a narrow ribbon of water between Iran and Oman. At its tightest point, the navigable channel is barely a few miles wide. On any given day, massive oil tankers, cargo ships, fishing boats, and military vessels squeeze through this corridor like cars on a one-lane bridge. One wrong move, one miscalculation. And you have a collision that could kill hundreds of sailors and potentially set off an international crisis. Now, put a blind warship in that mix, a ship that does not know its exact position, a ship whose radar is giving false returns. That is not just dangerous, that is catastrophic, waiting to happen. American military intelligence knew something was wrong almost immediately. The pattern was too consistent to be natural interference. 11 days, every ship, same area, same symptoms. Someone was doing this on purpose. Analysts at the National Security Agency and the Defense Intelligence Agency went to work. Satellites were redirected to scan the region. Signal intelligence teams began hunting for the source of the jamming. Electronic warfare experts studied the interference patterns, trying to understand exactly what kind of equipment was producing them. The answer came slowly, but it came clearly. A powerful electronic signal was being broadcast from a single location. It was designed specifically to disrupt the frequencies used by American navigation and communication systems. This was not random noise. This was a weapon. The source pointed directly at a small island called Larak Island. It sits right at the mouth of the Strait of Hormuz, perfectly positioned to disrupt any ship passing through. Think of it like a toll booth operator who can shut down a highway whenever he wants. That island was the choke point, and someone had built a weapon on it. When analysts pulled up satellite images of Larak Island, they found exactly what they expected. A compound on the island, antenna arrays mounted on the roof, power generators running constantly, satellite dishes pointed at the sky. This was not a lighthouse. This was not a fishing outpost. This was a purpose-built electronic warfare facility. And it was Iranian. Now the question became what to do about it. And this is where things got complicated. You could not just bomb the island. Iranian territory. Civilians potentially nearby. The political consequences would be enormous. Airstrikes would dominate international headlines. It could escalate into something much bigger than electronic interference. You also could not wait. Every day the jamming continued. American ships were at risk. A confused destroyer could accidentally engage a civilian vessel. A miscalculated course change could run a warship aground or put it on a collision path with an oil tanker carrying 2 million barrels of crude. The longer this went on, the higher the probability of a disaster. And a disaster in those waters could trigger a chain of events nobody wanted to see. The answer had to be surgical, precise, fast, invisible to the world until it was already over. The answer was the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit. The 22nd MEU is one of the most capable rapid response forces on the planet. These Marines trained constantly for missions exactly like this one. Small target, hostile territory, time pressure, go in before anyone knows you are there, accomplish the mission, get out before the sun comes up. They had done it before in other places, under other flags. Now they were being asked to do it on a small Iranian island in the middle of the night. The plan was bold. MV-22 Osprey aircraft would carry the Marines from their amphibious assault ship to Larak Island. The Osprey is a remarkable machine. It takes off vertically like a helicopter, then tilts its rotors forward and flies like an airplane. It is fast, relatively quiet, and can land in spaces no traditional aircraft could use. For this mission, the Ospreys would fly low over the water, using the darkness and the terrain to stay hidden from Iranian radar. Their target was the roof of the jamming facility. Land on top, storm down through the building, destroy every piece of electronic warfare equipment inside. then climb back on the Ospreys and disappear before Iran could mount any meaningful response. The Marines rehearsed the mission over and over. They studied aerial photographs of the building. They built mock-ups of the interior based on intelligence estimates. They practiced room-clearing drills until every movement was muscle memory. Each man knew his position in the stack. Each man knew which room he would enter first. Each man knew who would be on his left and his right. The precision had to be absolute because they would only get one chance. But what the Marines did not know was that someone on that island had already begun preparing for them. His name was Colonel Reza Shirazi. He was a senior officer in Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. He was not a bureaucrat. He was not a paper pusher sitting in Tehran writing reports. He was a field commander, experienced, sharp, paranoid in exactly the way a good soldier should be paranoid. And he had noticed something in the days leading up to the mission. American surveillance aircraft had been circling at the edge of visible range. Satellite passes over his island had increased. Communications from his superiors in Tehran had become more urgent and more frequent. Colonel Shirazi could not prove an attack was coming. But every instinct he had built over decades told him the Americans were not just watching, they were planning. So he made a decision. He moved his garrison inside the building. Previously, most of his men had been housed in barracks outside the main facility. That was the standard setup. But it also left the building itself lightly defended. Shirazi changed that overnight. He ordered every soldier inside the compound. He distributed ammunition on every floor. He placed men at every staircase, every corridor, every doorway. He turned the jamming facility into a fortress. And he waited. The Ospreys launched at 3 a.m. No lights, no radio chatter, just the low thump of rotors against the wind and the dark water of the Gulf sliding beneath them. The Marines sat in the back in silence. Some had their eyes closed. Some were running through their assignments one last time in their heads. Some were doing what combat soldiers have done since the beginning. They were thinking about home, about the people they wanted to see again, about the reasons they had put on this uniform in the first place. Larak Island appeared as a dark shape against slightly less dark water. The compound was visible. The antennas on the roof stood out like skeletal fingers reaching toward the sky. The Ospreys flared, descended, and slammed onto the rooftop with a force that rattled teeth and shook dust from every surface. The ramps dropped. Marines poured out into the darkness. And everything went wrong almost immediately. The Iranians on the roof were ready. Muzzle flashes lit up the night. Bullets cracked and ricocheted off concrete and metal. Shouts in Farsi mixed with shouts in English. The first 30 seconds were chaos. Pure, violent chaos. Marines scrambled for cover behind rooftop equipment. Return fire came fast. Training kicked in. Identify the threat. Return fire. Move to the next position. Communicate. Keep moving. The rooftop was cleared in under 2 minutes. Those 2 minutes felt like 2 hours. But the roof was just the beginning. The real fight was below. Going down meant going into the unknown. Stairwells were narrow and dark. Every doorway was a potential ambush. The Marines moved in pairs, leapfrogging from one position to the next. One man covered while the other advanced. Every room had to be cleared. Every corner had to be checked. And on every single floor, Iranian fighters were waiting. The third floor was brutal. Small rooms, close quarters. The kind of fighting where you can hear the other man breathing. A Marine squad leader went down with a wound to his shoulder. A young sergeant behind him stepped over his fallen leader and took command without a single moment of hesitation. That is what training does. That is what courage looks like, when it has no time to think about being brave. The second floor was worse. The Iranians had fortified it using heavy electronic equipment racks as cover. Metal cabinets, server towers, thick enough to stop bullets. The firefight on that floor lasted 6 minutes. In the context of modern combat, 6 minutes is an eternity. Every second stretched out. Every bullet felt personal. Marines used grenades to clear entrenched positions. They moved through the smoke and dust with weapons up, eyes scanning, hearts pounding. When the floor was finally secure, the Marines faced a problem nobody had anticipated: the explosives. The original plan called for placing timed charges on the jamming equipment and leaving before they detonated. Clean, simple, effective. But the explosives team had taken casualties during the firefight. Equipment bags had been lost in the chaos. Somewhere between the roof and the second floor, the demolition charges had disappeared. Without them, the mission was incomplete. The jamming system was still alive, still transmitting, still blinding every American ship in the strait. The room fell silent. Marines looked at each other. The clock was ticking. Dawn was coming. Iranian reinforcements could arrive at any moment. And the equipment was right there in front of them, blinking and humming, doing exactly what it was designed to do. Then a young corporal stepped forward. His name was James Holloway, 22 years old, from a small town in Tennessee that most people have never heard of. Before joining the Marines, he had spent 2 years working in his uncle's electrical repair shop. He fixed toasters. He fixed radios. He rewired old houses. He knew what cables did. He knew what happened when you cut them. Holloway looked at the equipment racks. He saw the thick bundles of cables running from the electronic systems up through the ceiling to the antenna arrays on the roof. Those cables were the lifeline of the jamming system. Cut them, and the weapon dies. He pulled out his combat knife. His sergeant grabbed his arm. Those lines could be carrying high-voltage current. You could die. Holloway looked at his sergeant. He pulled his arm free. He went to work. The first cable was thick, heavy rubber insulation. He sawed through it in 4 hard strokes. Sparks jumped and crackled. The second cable, the third, the fourth. His hands were shaking now, not from fear, from the sheer physical effort of cutting through industrial-grade wiring. On the 5th cable, the screens in the room flickered. On the 6th, they went dark. The blinking lights died. The hum of machinery faded to nothing. Silence. 3,000 meters away, on the bridge of an American destroyer in the Strait of Hormuz, a navigation officer stared at his screen. The GPS signal had locked in. The coordinates were accurate. The radar returns were real. He called out to the captain. "Sir, navigation is back." The captain did not ask questions. He did not need to. He simply nodded and gave the order to resume normal transit. All across the strait, American ships came back to life. Systems that had been unreliable for weeks suddenly worked perfectly. Sailors checked their instruments 3 and 4 times, unable to believe what they were seeing. Clean signals, accurate data, everything functioning the way it was supposed to. They did not know that a young corporal had just cut 6 cables with a knife. Holloway stood up. His hands were bleeding where the sharp edges of metal cable shielding had sliced through his skin. His sergeant looked at the dark screens. Then he looked at Holloway. "That was good work, Marine." That was all he said. That was all that needed to be said. The withdrawal was fast. Back up the stairs, onto the roof. The Ospreys circled in the darkness and came in one at a time. Marines loaded aboard. The wounded went first, carried by their brothers. Then everyone else. The last man did a head count. Everyone accounted for. He climbed aboard. The ramps came up. The Ospreys tilted their rotors forward and accelerated into the black sky. Below them, Lyric Island shrank into the darkness. The facility sat silent and dark on the rocky ground. No signal, no jamming, no weapon. Now, here is where the story gets even more interesting. Because the mission was not quite as clean as it seemed. Colonel Shirazi was not inside the building when the Marines hit it. Hours before the raid, he had taken a small boat offshore. He watched through binoculars as the Ospreys appeared over the island. He heard the gunfire echoing across the water. He saw the lights inside the building flicker and die. And he did something no one expected. He smiled. Because 6 months earlier, Colonel Shirazi had ordered his engineers to build a backup system. A second jamming installation hidden in a different building on a different part of the island. Smaller. Functional. He had always believed the Americans would eventually come for the main facility. He had planned for it. The backup was his insurance policy. When the main system went dark, the backup would activate automatically. But that backup system never turned on. Not that night. Not ever. Because 3 days before the Marines ever boarded those Ospreys, an American signals intelligence team had noticed something unusual. Power consumption patterns on Lyric Island did not match the output of a single facility. There was a small secondary power draw. It was a tiny detail, easy to overlook, but someone noticed it. Someone asked the right question, and a quiet order was given. A United States Navy dive team was dispatched to the waters off Lyric Island. They located an undersea power cable running from the Iranian mainland to the location of the backup facility. They cut it, silently, without a single shot fired. 2 full days before the Marines launched their assault. The backup system was dead before it ever had a chance to live. Colonel Shirazi sat in his boat that night, waiting. It would be hours before he learned the truth. His backup was already gone, cut apart in the dark by divers. The mission happened in the dark, and it ended in the dark. That is the nature of this kind of work. You do not do it for glory. You do it because it needs to be done for sailors you will never visit. Systems work because someone, somewhere, made sure they would not fail. Every American warship passed safely the next morning. The sailors on those ships woke up, checked their instruments, did their jobs, and came home safe. They did not know about the raid. They did not know about the cables. They did not know about the young man from Tennessee who fixed problems that could start wars. And that is exactly how it should be. Because the greatest victories are the ones you never hear about. The threats that disappear before anyone notices they were there. The dangers that dissolve because someone had the courage to act. A team of planners, analysts, divers, and Marines. Most of them unknown, all of them extraordinary. They took apart a weapon designed to blind the most powerful navy on Earth. They did it with precision and courage. Drop your answer below because I read every single comment. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one. Real missions, real courage, real consequences. The kind of content that makes you think and makes you feel something. And if you know someone who loves military history, send them this video. Let them hear this story Let them know what sacrifice looks like when the cameras are not rolling and the headlines never come.